Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. This is the show where I take a look at every classic Doctor Who story, plus a bunch of Big Finish audio dramas, one episode a day, 7 days a week. And today, on the 19th of June, 2018, we are starting the finale to Season 10, John Pertwee's penultimate season on Doctor Who, with the Green Death Episode 1. And the Green Death Episode 1 gets off to a great start, well, by introducing the politics of this story. Yes, this story is one with a political message. And like the Curse of Peladon before it, in opposed to, say, the mutants, this political message is conveyed rather well, at least over the course of this first episode. It's obviously dealing with an environmental theme. You have global chemicals, a big, bad corporation, which is actually a bit deeper than big, bad corporation, because, well, it at least has motives of they're trying to save the planet while still running off petrol, even though they are objectively the villains of this piece, and the leader is objectively evil. Like, he's a really bad guy. Don't get me wrong. This isn't a perfect everything's nuanced sort of situation. This is a bit more the corporation. The little men are nuanced. Like, you have the whole, well, what about all the jobs you're going to be losing? But the whole basically thing is like, hey, we need to find alternative energies and alternative food sources, or else, we're going to have a problem. And the titular Green Death, well, that's the mystery of this story. We don't get an answer in this first episode. Basically what happens is global chemicals took over this town in Wales called Llanfairfach. Hopefully I'm saying that right. I will probably screw that pronunciation up a bunch of times throughout the course of this review of these 6 episodes, because of course I am. And you have Stevens, the big director, comes in promising more jobs, which, is a good thing. The miners have been laid off. They need somewhere to work. It actually works. But one of this guy, his name is Di Evans, and he's in the mines, and something happens in the first scene. He dies after getting out of the mines and raising an emergency, and for some reason his skin is green. They bring in this professor who's in charge of these nearby processes at Whole Wheel, which is sort of this. It's sort of a hippie commune, but it's not. It's much less hippie, and it has sort of a bit socialist, communist, annotations about it, but it's generally people, they generally do want to help. It's more of it's not the we want free stuff, it's we genuinely want to help people. We're trying to work to find clean energies. We're paying everything. We're just trying to, this is just sort of our research community. It's just sort of an alternative research environment. It's not like a delegitimate, like we're not using science sort of thing. It's not like an anti-science thing, because I hate anything that's really anti-science. But it's sort of like we're not like the big corporation. We're just a small time research. It's run by this Professor Jones, who has no idea. He thinks it might be putrefaction as to why this guy's glowing green. And he becomes Jones becomes an important player later in the episode, when the Doctor and Joe actually arrive. I haven't even gotten to them yet. But yeah, you have this intrigue of like, why is he green? And of course, Unit's going to be called in, but what's interesting is that we've seen the Doctor change over the course of this season. Again, only the 3 Doctors and this story are set on Earth with Unit. Like, Unit is not a factor. Like, the Doctor's free. He's still trying to get Joe to Metabolus 3, but they're on Earth. And he basically tells Joe, like, Joe comes in, they have a little conversation. Joe is ready to go off to this Whole Wheel and try to stop the global chemicals because she believes in the cause, whereas the Doctor just wants to go off to Metabolus 3 and continue his adventures because, well, he likes adventure. He doesn't want to be, he's no longer tied down. He wants to show Joe the universe. And we eventually see him get to Metabolus 3. There's some really nice scenes on Metabolus 3, really well directed. Michael Bryant directs this one again, and he's great. He's a great director. He gets a lot of the emotions through the characters, and he gets just a lot of good stuff going on in the story. Like, he gets everything to be really, really, really solidly done. But the Doctor, they have this moment where the Brigadier then comes in and like demands the Doctor goes down, and the Doctor refuses. And the Brigadier and Joe have this argument. The Brigadier is like, yes, the global chemicals is great because they're getting 25% more oil from like the same amount of petrol, which, honestly, even though it is ruining, that's still a good thing. That'll make gasoline cheaper, and it'll make cars cheaper, which, was sort of genuinely a good thing. Like, if Yes, it's bad, and it'll use up. You'll be able to use it. It's just as if it's just as effective. It'll last over time, but it's still going to run out, and that's still a concern. But the story never quite forgets that. Hey, at least they're trying to buy time before they have to get to that. Even though of course you have some of the things like time isn't being used, you need to get it as soon get away from it as soon as possible, which is still very relevant today. It's a very relevant issue today, and even here it's done very very well. Maybe a little preachy in places, but it's still a pretty decent message, and the message sort of comes out down naturally. Though what's kind of nice is it never quite uses radiation scare tactics, because we have this mine where there's again this guy that he has the titular Green Death, and so you get the Brigadier and Joe to go down. Well, the Doctor is pretty much off screen for quite a bit of this episode. Like, he isn't there very much. He's just sort of like, I'm gone to Metabulus 3. That's where I'm going. That is what I'm doing. You can't stop me. He eventually comes back and goes down, but only after. Well, Joe actually meets Professor Jones, who is hilarious. Like, they have these amazing things. Joe's a klutz. She nearly ruins some of his research on mushrooms, as an alternative food source, as well as then he pays her back by telling her there's a big bug growing on her leg. And they already have this amazing chemistry. Like, they're already sort of being set up as a couple, and they're actually genuinely, they have chemistry. They'd make a good couple. They're good characters. Clifford Jones is played by a great guy. Like, the guy who plays him is really good. And you have just this episode where everything is good. Like, and then Joe insists that she's gonna go down to the mine and try to see what's up. So she does. And the cliffhanger is, well, someone seems to have sabotaged it as the mine it starts going down, but it won't stop. It keeps gaining speed. Like, this episode is perfect at just getting everything going. Again, maybe the message is a little preachy in places, and it's just a little bit on the side of a little overly long with pacing, and maybe the Doctor could have been involved a bit more in the plot, because this is 6 episodes. So I'm going to give The Green Death Episode 1 a 9 out of 10. Alright, it is the 19th of June, 2018, and I just finished watching Episode 2 of The Green Death. And Episode 2 of The Green Death kind of doesn't do as much as Episode 1 of The Green Death did. This is mainly in terms of plot development. Like, don't get me wrong, there's still some plot development here, and we actually get quite a bit of character development. But other than that, there really isn't too much. Quite a lot of this is just walking through the mines. And if I'm going to be honest, it's actually really engaging to be going through the mines. You have a sense that that the entire story might fall apart if, it's one of those things where potentially you could have something with an actual problem going on, because, well, it doesn't really go completely without having the whole we know we are actually going to be ending things. Like, you have the real story going on, and everything is generally pretty good. It starts, it goes. We have Joe and Bert mainly going through the mine because they're trying to get out at another entrance because there's no way to go back up, while the Doctor and his crew are generally trying to find cutting equipment. And that is one of the things that it's one of the things that it's one of the things that the story goes on to be, and it just it that it goes a little bit further to things, and then you have the story going on and continuing, but you also have some time just to sort of slip back and watch the characters. Like, you have a lot of action sequences with this, and there's a lot of things where everything everything sort of just goes on the story, and it starts to slow down a bit. Um, it's you have this real this real fear that um, everything doesn't quite work. You have this fear that Joe may not get out of this mine alive, because there is a fear of that. Like, it's the mine is very much dangerous, and it's one of those things where, well, it could end with a death. Like, that is most definitely a fear here. Um, and then everything. Um, it's one of those things about the story to go on. You sort of you build on to this with Joe and Bert going down until the Doctor eventually gets down there and meets up with them, and they see what is essentially you essentially see the story go on, and then eventually you have this big amazing cliffhanger where you see the maggots. Like, you get the actual fear of something going bad. Like, there's actually really really bad stuff going on with global chemicals. Like, they are not good. They're not a good company. Like, yeah, it's known that Global Chemicals has cutting equipment that they could use to get down there. They refuse to give it up. Then Stevens begins to hypnotize people and makes mention of, for the first time, of a bunch of what are known as what's known as the boss. Who's just sort of in one of those. It's one of those things where you have the story, going on, and then it just sort of it slows down, and we get quite a few things. We get the things to go, and we have you have the Doctor go in, and then he eventually has this amazing action scene, which takes up the majority of the episode. Is a really good action scene, which is why it's hard really to talk about this episode, because it's a good action scene. It's got some great quips. John Pertwee is great. I think everyone's great in the story so far. It's just, well, there isn't much to talk about, and again, the plot doesn't really go anywhere in terms of plot. It's just one of those things that's like, we're gonna be fine. So we get a really good cliffhanger, and I am expecting, I'm expecting that everything will at least go up a little more with, everything will a little more with the it's one of those things where everything has at least a little bit to go on, and it ends well. So I'm gonna give the Green Death episode 2 an 8 out of 10, because it's not as good as the first episode, but it's still pretty good. Alright, it's the 20th of June 2018, and I just finished watching episode 3 of The Green Death. Episode 3 being the middle episode, which is perfect in nearly every way except for one problem. A lot of the green screen is really not aged well. I won't hold that against the episode too terribly much, but even at the time, I don't think the green screen, was this bad. I mean, you can really tell that there is fringing, and you can tell that they're using CSO. Like, it's not, they barely even try to hide it. It's just like, yeah, we know we've used CSO for this one. Just sort of, you've sort of got to deal with it. Mainly because, it's one of those things. it's one of those things where you really just, you sort of realize, yeah, this isn't the best when it comes to an effect. Like, it's not. It's it's just sort of like, yeah, we have this thing, and we're gonna use it, but we really don't. We probably shouldn't be using it, because it's just one of those. It's not a good effect. It doesn't look nice. It's just it sort of sits there like, hey, I think I'm gonna be a decent effect, but then it just yes, it isn't. It doesn't look good on the whole. It looks really tacky. It looks like they were phoning it in, and you know that's not something that you want in your effect. Like, it, of all the effects, it's not one of the it's it really should have, they really should try to work a little bit more on getting some of the fringing out before they actually brought that effect to air. It's just, it doesn't look nice. It's just sort of like, it's one of those, it's just a mark on this story that, like, yeah, it's not a good effect. It's not an effect that is effective. But the story itself is genuinely pretty good. Mainly, you have the Doctor and you have the Doctor. She and Joe getting themselves out. Well, the Brigadier actually goes to Global Chemicals and is about ready to shut them down for basically for doing illegal activities. That's basically what they're doing. Like, let's not kid ourselves. Like, this is all highly illegal. It doesn't. There's no real way to spin it that it wouldn't be illegal in at least some way. Like, you essentially left two people to die. So he's ready to go up to the highest. Well, the thing is that Global Chemicals has friends in high places, which sort of helps make the Doctor feel a bit more justified. It feels like if it helps with creating this as an underdog story, with everything sort of just like being like, yeah, we have to have an underdog story. Like, it's like you have to have the people at Whole Wheel being the underdogs, or else it really doesn't quite work for them, just because they aren't they aren't the ones in charge. They aren't the ones that could very easily be that could get easily not like beaten. It's one of those things where they they have to go past it. And you know what, that's interesting enough to see. They are the story itself is given quite a lot of interesting things to go on. You also have something interesting helping with the story is that the maggots look genuinely creepy. We have some stuff at Global Chemicals, because that's where the mine actually comes out. They end up coming out in Global Chemicals, where they're helped by this guy Elgin, who then becomes processed. And then you have this guy working for Stevens, who they appeal to his better nature of a human, as a human being, like, hey, you don't want to kill these people because you're causing so many problems. Like, why would you be doing this? This isn't right and just. It's just it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, you're killing people. And so he really, it doesn't compute for him. So he then has to commit. Then he then commits suicide by essentially just jumping into going into the he jumps off a cliff, and you see him commit suicide, and that is genuinely frightening. It sort of helps with the threat. And then you have the second half of the episode where it's much more character focused on mainly Joe and Cliff's relationship as they, Cliff Jones has basically decided, hey, I'm going to the Amazon to try to help get the, basically help these guys have their, have these, have them have, they're going to try to help the world, like he's going to refine it. And what's interesting is that a lot of stuff is given that you have all these eclectic, it's sort of the whole wheel, even though they're all sort of hippies, I guess, they all have educations, they all have their, they have their backgrounds. You have mathematicians, artists, psychologists. It's all very, very interesting sorts of people, like doing their, doing their thing. They have their, they have a thing where everything, they are going with stuff. They are trying to help the world. They realize that they have to do things. They have someone designing windmills and working out extreme mathematics. And again, they're trying to solve the crisis of food. It's all of these things that just, they build up on each other to make it feel like, hey, these people actually care about the world and they want to see the world become a better place. And it's sort of, you see Joe's, Katie Manning playing Joe, really falling in love with this guy. And even though the doctor actually tries to stop it, basically by not letting them be alone. And then we get to the cliffhanger, which is, well, one of the maggots. They have they got this egg from the maggots, and it hatches, and the giant maggot starts to basically it starts to, so that the entire story is like that, it hatches, it's a maggot, and then it goes to attack Joe, and that's our cliffhanger. Like, that is great. Again, the only real problem with this one is, again, the fact that the CS, the color separation overlay and it doesn't really work very well. Like, it doesn't look quite nice. So, all that considered, I'm going to give Green Death Episode 3 a 9 out of 10. Alright, it is the 21st of June 2018, and I just finished watching episode 4 of The Green Death. And episode 4 is an episode that is practically perfect in every way, mainly because it gets us out of the mines completely, and actually gets us into the meat and potatoes of the problem. Mainly because, well, this is the episode where the doctor gets to be, he gets to do up some disguises, so he can basically infiltrate Global Chemicals. Unit infiltrates Global Chemicals as well. Basically, it's double infiltration from both ends. You have this is the research episode where Joe and Professor Jones both work on trying to figure out that it's sort of like a disease that's killing people. It's acting kind of like a disease, even if it's not alive. It's a mutation, and the maggots seem to be coming out of the ground, and really they start to attack people, and you get this feeling that everything is being attacked, and you just have these maggots coming out of the ground just to attack people in a very, very creepy sort of sequence. Like, it's really quite creepy. Like, the maggots work quite a lot. Like, guns don't work on them. Really, all they can do is sort of firebomb them and hope that works. And that's not good for the environment, is it? This is just an episode where you have Joe accidentally saving the day, because she's like, I can help. She knocks over some fungus onto the professor's slides, and that actually ends up undoing everything. It's one of the things unknowingly that, like, the fungus just sort of eats them up. Like, the fungus is sort of a deus ex machina in this story overall. Like, that's really all the purpose that it serves. It's there just to be like, hey, we are deus ex machina. We are here literally just so we can solve the plot, even though, even though the plot needs to be solving, yes, but it's not the best plot ender for things. It's weird. Like you have it's a very weird thing, but they sell it enough. Like it's easy enough to sell to the audience that that this is the plot. You have Katie Manning as Jo Grant, and one of her best performances. She's getting out and trying to find the slides. She comments that this is the first time she's ever actually had to shut up and just pass people test tubes. Like that really hasn't been her job with UNIT. She's been a bit more active help, even if she isn't as good as the doctor is at science, and she's not a scientist. She's Jo Grant. She's basically working with espionage, and it creates a good, nice character piece for her. Like this episode is a really good character piece, and she just plays it really well, and it comes off as really. She's really solid when it comes to this. Like she really knows her stuff. She gets everything, and the guy playing Cliff Jones is also great. You have a cleaning lady who comes in and is like, "Oh, now with the maggots, they've come out the pipe," in a exaggerated Welsh accent, which I can't really do. I'm no good at a Welsh accent, which leads basically to the doctor infiltrating Global Chemicals because, Global Chemicals knows everything. Like, they have this Elgin guy who's been like, "We need to stop this." This is the one guy on the inside who's like, compassionate, is like, "Hey, we can't keep doing this. This is bad, and it'll kill the environment and stuff." So the doctor actually starts by basically dressing up as a milkman. So he dresses up as a milkman, and with that he goes and is like, he pretends, not only pretends to be a milkman, but pretends to be a milkman, and then he pretends to be a cleaning lady. Well, Mike Yates is sent in on the inside, even though Yates is being washed over like a hawk. Like, Yates does not have a chance to even talk to the doctor. Like, there's even this point where he slips out of the elevator, and the doctor is a cleaning lady, or dressed up as like the cleaning lady, and John Pertwee puts on a funny voice. And you know what? It's just a fun episode. And the big cliffhanger at the end is that the boss that's been lurking in the shadows is a computer. Like, that's just... It's a very ahead of its time twist that a computer that seems to be running everything, like an evil megalomaniacal computer. It's a really good twist. Like, that is a really well executed twist. You don't really see it coming, even though, and then looking back, you can see it coming. Because it sounds human enough. It just sounds deep, and you think maybe the microphone is why it sounds weird. But no, it's just because it's a computer. That being said, I'm going to give The Green Death episode 4 a perfect 10 out of 10. Go watch this episode. It's amazing. Alright, it is the 22nd of June, 2018, and I just finished watching episode 5 of the Doctor Who serial, The Green Death. And episode 5 of The Green Death is interesting in that, well, everything comes out into the open. The boss, the shady manager, organizer person, who was essentially running Global Chemicals, is revealed to be a computer. And as a supercomputer, he is linked to a human brain. This is sort of the riff on artificial intelligence. Obviously, it's not the first time it's been done in science fiction, but it's an example of a good way of doing it in sci-fi. Like, it's done well. The guy that voices the boss has a very silky voice, and it's a voice that's very easy to see yourself potentially selling your soul to, or potentially, listening to. Like, "Hey, listen to me, I'm the boss. You will talk to me. I am in charge." It's a very silky voice, and of course, this allows the Doctor to bring out his old hatred of computers, which is an on and off sort of hatred that happens. I love I hate the inconsistency that the Doctor sometimes hates computers, but sometimes they're all right. Like, it literally depends on his mood. And you know what, Doctor? You could just... Why don't you just, decide if you like computers or not? Like, don't be that way. But what is great, what's kind of sad, is we also have a lot of stuff with Clifford Jones, who, well, because in the last episode he went to rescue Jo, and well, that didn't go too well because, well, he ended up infected by the titular Green Death, and that left him bedridden for quite a bit of this episode. Like, he doesn't have too much to do here. Like, he's just sort of like, I'm bedridden. This is my role because, well, everything is awful, and I don't have. I can't be happy with this because this is what's happened to me. I'm stuck off to the sidelines in the supporting role, sort of here. And you just sort of, we have characters trying to get to places just so we can try to get to a conclusion. Of course, there's more maggots. You have the fear of maggots hatching into, becoming, because, maggots turn into other bugs. That's a big fear. Like, that is one of the fears with this episode. That is where the story is going. But you also have just a couple of points where you realize the budget ran out. Like, you can tell points where it's like, yeah, that budget ran out there because, well, let's be honest. They green screen an outdoor shot where it's a still image of a unit Jeep outside, and they have the actors running and going in front of it, and it's a decent enough green screen. And there are some really, really bad model shots here. The model, oddly enough, when Doctor has to do quite a lot of models around people, they don't do very well. They can do spaceships. They can do planets. They can do explosions. They can't seem to model people quite right, which is kind of sad because you'd think if anything was going, it's just one of those weird things that you really wouldn't expect to make Doctor Who sort of choke up. Like, really, it's modeling the people that cause the problems. Like, it's not like some other sort of modeling problem. It's just people, because that's a real shame. Like, it's not the worst sort of, again, it's not the worst model. It's not even that terribly bad of a model. It just doesn't do too much. And, well, the episode just is a little bit long. It succumbs to that episode 5 syndrome of just being that touch too long, so you can't really get a feel for it. Like, it's not the best episode. It's the very middle ground. We are trying to get to the places, get everyone in for the big finale next week. And you can tell it's they don't even try to hide it. It's one of those things where they're building up to episode 6, and, well, of course, episode 6, that's tomorrow's episode. It's not, that episode isn't meant to be, that episode's meant to be built up, and it's meant to have its own audience. So I'm going to go ahead and give The Green Death episode 5 an 8 out of 10 because it's a great episode. It's great. It plays with some fun ideas. Robert Sloman's a great writer, and there's obviously acting talent and real talent behind it. It just has the problem of being draggy. Alright, it is the 26th of June. Not the 26th, the 23rd of June 2018. And I just finished watching episode 6 of The Green Death. And episode 6 of The Green Death has a lot of stuff to get into. So this is probably going to be long, so strap yourself in because this is probably one of the most best episodes of Doctor Who in general. Well, you have Mike Yates captured once again. Which actually leads to, and Mike Yates being captured actually leads to quite a bit of conflict later on. It sets up quite a bit. Is that he's sort of, he's been captured and he starts to lose it again. He loses, his basically his sanity. He is going a little crazy because of this experience of being captured. It's not a good experience. It's a very bad experience for Yates. Because they lock him up in a cell, and it isn't until the end of the story when the Doctor is actually able to get him out of that cell and get him back into sanity and back to basically back to the world. It's not this isn't a good time for Mike. He's got the problems of being captured, and he's essentially hypnotized once again. it's funny because the Doctor himself is like, yeah, this is Mike will be our only hope. Except that doesn't quite work out. You have this problem of, well, you have this problem of the story being all about. You have the problem of the story being essentially a big one about how everything is just sort of there, and then you have so you have Mike caught out. You have Sergeant Benton and the Brigadier bring in to the Doctor, while trying to figure out who's the Doctor is seen at his lowest here. He is ready to give up. He has no idea how he's going to be able to save these people from the maggots. Well, and something bad happens. Well, one of the maggots gets rid of its maggot shape and turns into a giant fly. And people always complain about the giant fly. You know what? I think the model work on the giant fly is pretty decent. Yeah, it's obviously a model and it's obviously like puppetry, but it's not that bad, especially by Doctor Who standards in 1973 at the end of a season. It is a pretty decent looking model. It works for what it needs to be. It's not a bad model. It's not a perfect model, but it's better than some of the worst models we've had in the 60s. It's decent. You have Nancy making food, and then a maggot eats some of the food and then dies. The serendipity is sort of, it's the, hey, we can kill these maggots if we feed them the fungus. So you have that as a big revelation, like, hey, maybe this isn't hopeless after all. Maybe we can actually survive this. Maybe we'll live to see the end. Maybe we'll live to see tomorrow morning. It's not, the world's not hopeless after all. The world isn't as dark as it was before. So you have that as a, yes, everything's good. We might actually survive. The world, when we might survive. So you have the Doctor and Benton going out to in Bessie and just dropping the fungus onto the maggots, and that kills them. But then the fly shows up and attacks them, and we have the Doctor figuring out, all right, what do you do to kill a fly? You crush it. So they throw his cape over, and it crushes the fly. So the fly is dead. And now now that they've got the solution, now it's just to beat the people at Global Chemicals. It's not, this isn't a very difficult solution. So the Doctor goes in alone. He has one final confrontation with the boss, which involves, honestly, some great work where the Doctor appeals to Stephen's better nature. Like, the idea is that Stevens has been taken over completely by the boss, but that's simply not the case. He's, yes, he is hooked up to it, but his mind's still there. He realized that, hey, the Doctor was like, hey, you're going to keep killing people. You're not actually going to help people like you think you are. Because Robert Sloman and Barry Letts do a really good job when they wrote this story. Did a really good job of making the story when they wrote it feel very much like the villains were justified. Like, the villains aren't bad people. Like, they're villains, but they're still trying to have noble motivations, and they honestly want what is best for the world. They don't just want to see the world burn. We aren't here in it for evil's sake. We're here for noble enough reasons. Even if obviously we aren't good people, we're still trying. We wish to be good people. We don't want to see the world dead and destroyed. Like, why would we want that? That's just wrong. So you have that aspect of it, but you also have this aspect of it where then you have the aspect of the boss not quite being more human than it thinks it is. One, it falls into the trap of thinking, "Hi, I'm undefeatable. I can beat these unit people like that. It's so easy. Nothing bad's possibly gonna happen to me." And so he starts gloating and humming classical music before the Doctor shows up and convinces Stevens, to fight back against the machine, which causes it to blow up. Because, again, their plan was essentially to have slaves. And so they were essentially going for world domination. Like, that was their plan. It's a mad scientist villain plan. And, it works. You think, well, this is a computer. Of course it would think big. It would think, yes, we can make uniform, everything, one human race, and everything is perfect. We're evil. And that's great. So that blows up. And then we get to the party. And then we get to the gut punch of the story. This is the episode where Jo Grant leaves the Doctor. She leaves, and the scene, many people who are familiar with the new show and has only seen bits of classic who may complain that there aren't as deep characters, but I have them take a look at this story and the final scenes of this story in particular to really just see how far the acting goes, and it's done with subtlety. Subtlety is the word of the story here. Like, this isn't some overly bombastic Bad Wolf Bay, Rose Tyler leaving the Doctor, or Clara going off and getting to have her own TARDIS. This is Jo Grant falling in love and saying, all right, it's time for me to go. It's been fun, Doctor. I'll save you some wedding cake. And it's a genuinely touching scene. Like, you sort of go through everyone's emotions in this. You start with, you start with, of course, Clifford Jones proposing marriage. Jo says, "Wait, right now, really?" It's like, "Oh yeah, no, let's get married." She says yes, but it's a very difficult yes. And throughout the rest of the scene, Katie Manning plays it just that little bit off center, where she's like, this was a difficult decision. I don't know if I made the right decision, even though I'm going with it. Like, okay, that's something. There's definitely something to be said there. Like, that is there. But then the Doctor finds out, and he can't quite keep a happy face in the proceedings. He doesn't even stay for the party. Like, the Brigadier comes in with good news, like, hey, this research facility, the whole wheel, the Nut Hutch, it's going to be a research facility with UN protections. You'll get unlimited funding. Great! That's amazing. The Doctor gives Jo the crystal that he got from Metebelis 3, which has been dealt with this whole hypnosis plot. It's how they've been breaking the hypnosis. And then he decides to drive off into the sunset. And it's done very silently. There isn't any overly bombastic music. It's a quiet moment. We're reflecting on this. And with that reflection in mind, and the fact that this is just one of those amazing endings, I would say this is probably the best companion departure done in at least all televised Doctor Who. Like, I mean, of course, the ideas have some great stuff. The books have some great stuff. But with performed television Doctor Who on screen, this is the best companion departure. It's the best shot. It's the best acted. I know everyone loves Sarah Jane's exit. I know everyone loves the bittersweet exit of Jamie and Zoe. But this one just sort of gets to you because of how quiet and oddly how normal it is. We aren't going to quite get a completely normal, naturally arising, well-executed exit for a while after this. It's the last of its kind for quite a bit. So you have just the normalness. So with that in mind, I'm going to give The Green Death, Episode 6, the perfect 10 out of 10. And with that, we average up the episodes for The Green Death to give The Green Death a final score of 9 out of 10. Thank you, everybody, for watching me on this rather sad episode of the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon, if I'm going to be honest. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you next time when the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon returns, when we start John Pertwee's final season of The Doctor with a run of 7 more John Pertwee stories before we move on to the next Doctor with The Time Warrior.